She reaches for the ceramic. He snatches it before and breaks it.
Like a petulant child.
Welcome to Archaeology Books for Fun, digging books that aren't drier than dirt. I'm your host, Tristan Herrenstein, and with me as always is my co-host, Barbara Clark.
Hello everybody.
Today we are continuing with the book Relics by Mary Anna Evans. So last time was a dramatic episode.
Very.
We finally got to the probable murder, but they're still figuring that out with a house fire that is kind of mysterious, and then of course more drama around the work environment too, which is honestly my favorite part.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, it would be a great book even without the murder, but the murder is just the cherry on top.
Yep. So without further ado, let's jump right into chapter 11. So this chapter starts with us on site with Faye and the crew, and there was some tension with the crew previous episode where they were kind of being jerks.
They were being jerks.
Definitely misogynist.
Yes.
Right? I was unclear at the time how much of that was just one of them being a problem and how the other just kind of not speaking up, or how much it was all of them being a problem.
Yeah, I got the feeling it was just the one and the rest were kind of, you know how it is in friends groups. There's always
Well, they're all family
instigator.
too. So complicated, I'm sure. But she's got them all backfilling, and she's given them some lessons on how to do their job with excavation properly and everything. I thought it was interesting, demonstrates straightening your walls with a flat-bottomed trowel. I've never heard it described that way, but if you wanted to concisely describe the trowels we use in a book, I feel like that's probably about the best way.
Yeah.
Like, we would just say a masonry trowel, but not everybody knows what that means.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, because I know some people use like the garden, like what you use to dig a hole to put a plant in the ground as a trowel. And that's not kind of flat.
Right.
It's more scooped shaped.
That's not the kind we use.
Yeah.
She tells them about digging 1 centimeter at a time, and there's a whole discussion about how much that is. And she says it's the width of your pinky nail.
Yep.
And I have to ask, Barbara, did you measure your pinky nail too?
I didn't. Did you really?
I did, absolutely.
And was it?
Like she said in the book, it was just a little wide. But that's interesting. I've never heard that rule of pinky before, as they say in the book. Ha 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 ha. And I guess it's not a bad way of putting it. That was interesting.
I'm looking at my pinky nail right now.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering, I don't have a ruler though.
We can get you one. Let's pause it right now and go get you a ruler. She demonstrates screening, and she wanted to describe flotation, but didn't want to get into it with them at this moment. I thought that was interesting because it seems like the book is treating flotation as the default.
I noticed
for
that
field
too.
Work, and that's normally not.
Right. It's only used when you have stuff that'll float, and you're trying to get stuff that will float, like seeds.
Yeah,
and
it's something you do with a specific sample type.
Yeah.
You know, you have a fire pit and you want to see what woods they were burning, what seeds are in the fire. And then you'll do flotation.
And I've even done excavations where we might take a sample of the dirt and put it in a larger bag to use later for flotation if needed. Yeah. But I thought she made a good call in not going there with them at that moment. You know,
she could tell they were not into it.
Right.
And she's got time to do this, she thinks.
Right.
So then we come to the incident. So they're all backfilling, and she's having them screen everything. And she spots a piece of ceramic in George's back dirt pile. So, interestingly, apparently Raleigh had them put their back dirt on tarps, which you do, because then it keeps the back dirt separate from the others and also can make it easier to just dump the tarp in once you get enough dirt off. But he didn't have them cover the units. It's weird.
Yeah,
and the book knows it's weird.
Yeah, and usually you would cover the units to protect them from weather.
Right.
And to not do that is pretty kind of lazy.
Yeah. But she reaches for the ceramic. It's kind of iridescent piece of ceramic or something. And he snatches it before and won't give it to her, and then breaks it and then grinds it in the ground with his foot. And
it's like a petulant child.
It really is very petulant, actually.
Yes.
That's a word I used quite a bit, too. She says he's fired for destroying an artifact.
Which, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, like, you can't fire me because no one else will work for you. But this is interesting, and I don't know if the book is quite going for this, but it very clearly demonstrates a mismatch between what archaeologists are trying to do and what George A. in this case understands archaeology as being. He's demonstrated that it's better the project doesn't happen than it is to keep him on this project.
Yeah, which if the project is done poorly, then yeah, just let it be until someone can do it well.
If artifacts are destroyed out of petulance or stolen, then it's better off it not just staying where it is and being left alone.
Yeah.
So it's clearly not the threat he thinks it is.
Right.
and she's very reasonably says, so?
Yeah, right. Like, okay, bye.
Yeah. And so he and the rest of the two brothers, or the other two cousins, I guess, all leave the site, and it's just her and Joe.
And I thought she handled this really well because, I mean, as a woman, I can tell you, like, there's that whole, like, oh, she's too emotional. She's too angry. She can't lead. And she's just very calm and, like, she's mad, but she's professional about it. And she's just like, well, you're not doing your job correctly, then you're fired.
Yeah, and not even just not doing it correctly, like catastrophically not correctly.
Well,
like we always say, the context matters, and every piece that walks off from a site is a piece of that story gone forever. Yeah. And if he's intentionally destroying stuff, then...
And he's doing it as a sign of a direct sign of disrespect towards her, which is just...
Yeah.
You can't allow that. Man or woman, you can't allow that.
Right. I mean, that alone would be enough.
Yeah.
But again, if that's what all it was, his threat could have worked.
Right.
But because we understand this on a deeper level than he apparently does, like, no, that's ridiculous.
And at this point, I was very curious to see how Raleigh would respond.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, I wonder whose back he'll have, or what he'll have to say about it, or how he'll turn this on Faye and make it her fault. Just based on what we know about him so far.
Yeah, and we'll go talk to him next, but first she collects what's left of the ceramic, and there's some talk of trying to do thermoluminescence on it. We'll see, maybe.
Yeah.
And then she does go talk to Raleigh, and he's not supportive.
Shocker.
But he's also not like, you have to hire them back or anything.
Yeah,
But he does always have kind of veiled threats. I'll be monitoring your progress carefully,
Yeah, the way he's managing the site is not productive at all, and it's not creating an environment where people are going to want to be productive.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of shooting himself in the foot here, but we'll see, I guess.
Yep. And then she leaves that, and she needs to find more crew. And there's questions of who will work for her because of the situation. But she smells smoke around the remains of the house and then goes to find Joe doing his little ceremonial fire for Carmen, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is something we saw in the first book. He's burning tobacco and some things, and he's making black drink, which is Barbara's favorite.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk about Yaupon?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I've talked about it in other episodes, but Yaupon is a native plant to the southeastern U.S., and it's the only native plant that contains caffeine. So the Native Americans would use it as a form of ceremonial drink, and when the Europeans got here, they observed the Native Americans using this drink and then vomiting. And they, of course, based on their observations, thought it was the plant itself that was making them vomit, but it wasn't. But unfortunately, the plant got the scientific name Ilex vomitoria as a result. But it's just a result of the way in which they took the drink. They were fasting, they were dancing around a hot fire in the southeast, and I mean, you could drink hot water and have the same result. And so the name has stuck. But later on, when the Spanish were having a hard time importing coffee from Europe, they started drinking it too. And you can actually still drink it today. A lot of places are starting to, you can buy it on Amazon these days. It's kind of making a comeback, but it's been a traditional drink in like the Outer Banks region. And there's a lot of places in Florida now that are actually growing it for the purpose of making tea. So one of my favorites is a hibiscus Yaupon tea. Good combo.
Yeah. Yeah. So if that interests you, check that out.
Yeah.
I've had it before. It's tasty.
Yeah. And you can add honey and sugar and whatever you want to it, like in any tea.
Right. So now Faye needs to investigate some new places to dig because she's backfilling a place she knew wasn't going to work. but Raleigh was having people kind of excavate, sort of, as we call it.
Poorly.
Yeah, I don't even can quite call it excavating in an archaeological context at all. But so she goes to the grocery store to ask around because that seems like kind of the hub of places. Who owns what properties and stuff.
Yeah.
Georgia is there buying beer, which is awkward. They don't say, nothing happens, but it's just like, that's awkward.
Yeah.
He's always around.
He is always around. That's true.
He's kind of weird like that.
Yeah.
But we find out that Dwayne Montrose owns a property with the mound, which is the one that she most wanted to investigate. And that's not good because he's a jerk also and is not likely to give her permission. And then Miss Dovey owns a property around the bridge. And, you know, that seems promising for permission.
More promising than Mr. Montrose.
Right. So she gives Miss Dovey a call. She seems amenable. Faye goes over for food and she pulls up and Rania Smiley comes out and tells her Miss Dovey has changed her mind and she's gone to sleep.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I believe it.
Right. And I still don't understand exactly. I just want to know what's going on with Rania. Because remember, she was also yelling at Jimmy at the football game. And I'm having a hard time figuring out. There's obviously a story that we don't know yet. When it comes to Rania.
And we'll see more that just confuses this episode too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I'm very intrigued by Rania. That's the end of this first chapter, chapter 11. So we've got a project that's falling apart, a resentful community, a house fire, a mysterious death. Faye has just lost her crew, and we're only halfway through. Quick aside, if you know someone who listens on the commute and loves a dramatic murder mystery, send them the series. We're adding a real-world archaeologist perspective to the story. You can find episode 1 linked in the description. All right, chapter 12. Faye wakes up the next morning and starts kind of going through some of Carmen's work, and is thinking about how lucky it is it survived.
Yeah, because remember, we still don't know what happened to Carmen's briefcase.
Right, which makes her realize that the contents might be
what they were after, and now she has a copy of it.
Right, and she's the one that has a copy.
Yeah.
So she goes to Hannah's store, and again, I sometimes Faye makes decisions where I'm like, Faye, come on. But sometimes she's really smart, and this time she's like, I better make sure nobody is aware that I have a copy.
She doesn't come in and is like, hey, I need to make a photocopy of this.
Right. So she makes sure no one's around, waits a bit, and makes a photocopy.
Yeah.
So that's a good move, Faye. Faye returns to the site behind the grocery store where they were backfilling, and lo and behold, there's 2 people digging, not just Joe. And it turns out Elliot, one of the 3, has returned, and I think he very nicely apologizes and basically says, I'd like my job back.
Yeah, and I think Faye handles it really well. She's just like, hey, if, I need good workers. If you can be a good worker, you're welcome to come back.
Yeah.
So
yep.
Kind of sets the expectation, but
and Elliot kind of distances himself, even though he didn't do it the previous day, from his relatives and everything. So he does a pretty good job, I'd say.
And apparently, without George there and the other guy, I think Fred, Elliot's a great worker.
Yep. They're screening through 1/8-inch screen, which is a little fine for standard archaeology, especially in this context.
Right. Usually we use 1/4 inch as the go-to standard.
We would use 1/8 inch if we were expecting things that are really small, like beads and stuff. But when you're going through back dirt that's all out of context, and this is kind of not good archaeology, there's no way you'd be using.
Right. Yeah. Especially not know like if you were digging at a site where you expected to find like small little faunal remains or beads or seeds or something, you might, but
right, or you might do a sample or a feature through 1/8 inch. But because the reason you don't do that is because it's a lot harder to get stuff through an 1/8 inch, especially when you're working with clays.
Yeah, it slows down your work, and the volume, it takes a lot longer to get the same amount or the same volume of dirt through the screen. So you have to have a reason to justify it.
Yep. So they keep working. Turns out Elliot, like Barbara said, is a really great guy.
Apparently he's a talker.
He's a talker. He has hopes and plans for the future, which I put underneath there. Uh-oh.
Right.
So I'm hoping he survives this whole endeavor.
But I feel like Mariana Evans does a good job of kind of putting together all these different personalities that you usually do find on a field crew, and there's always that one talker.
There's the talker. No, and she's also very good at like not going quite the expected way for this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm worried for Elliot here, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's in actual danger.
Right.
Because by that metric, there's actually several people who could be in danger.
Right.
And they might all be in danger.
Right. They might all be in danger. I mean, gosh, there was a house fire. Multiple people could have been killed or hurt in a house fire.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious Carmen was the target, but we will find out.
Then we get an interview excerpt of Elliot and his wife Margie being interviewed together. They seem like a fun pair.
Yeah.
They're ribbing each other and they've got joking with each other and having a good time.
And it gives a good kind of insight, the interview, into like the economic situation of the Stujosa. So yeah, again, it kind of makes me worry about Elliot just because I'm starting to like the guy.
Right. That's always the fear in murder mysteries, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is a ghost story that they're told, and both Elliot and Margie both claim they have seen the ghost. But beyond that, apparently a woman running away from her tribe with a man died after giving birth, and the baby was adopted and integrated into Stujosa society. Kind of what the nuts and bolts of it, and probably the parts of it that I'm thinking will come back around at some point.
And I also wanted to mention that Elliot and his wife, I guess they live near the cell phone tower, and it kind of blocked their view. And I feel like we keep coming back to the cell phone tower, and I feel like it's going to become significant somehow. I don't know how, but I feel like it's going to become significant. So I just wanted to point it out. I could be wrong.
Next chapter 13. We start off with Faye having her typical lunch: peanut butter, honey, and a hot dog bun.
I feel like I have definitely had a bunch of peanut butter and jelly field sandwiches.
And I don't really do peanut butter, but I have done honey and honey and bread.
I don't think we can be friends anymore, Tristan.
Okay.
Yeah, peanut butter? What? It's so delicious. But you know what? I'll forgive you. Nobody's perfect.
But yeah, I used to do honey and bread for that same reason, because it kept well, pretty high energy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it was good for that.
Yeah, it's like you need something, but you don't want anything heavy because, I mean, in Florida, it's like hot and humid.
Right. Well, I wasn't working in Florida in this case, but. Well, and also, I don't have to prepare anything. I just throw the bread and the honey in the lunchbox.
Yeah.
And then I just do it in the field.
I had, side note, but I remember I was on a field project and I was with a guy that would just eat ramen noodles, like raw. He would just break them out of the package and eat them without any seasoning or anything. And I was like, okay, I know archaeology field techs are poor, but we're not that poor. I was like, this is weird, but okay.
I've heard people like to eat raw noodles, and I've never understood it, but
I've broken them up and like used them in like salads and stuff, but he would literally like just take
that's what I heard.
So weird.
I don't understand it.
I was like, what is happening?
There was always the one that had tuna.
Oh yeah, tuna and hot sauce and crackers was one of my go-tos.
We had one guy for a while would bring out like a 2 liter of Coke every time.
Would he drink it? The whole thing?
I think the crew chiefs made him stop because you need water.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just be drinking Coke all day. You need water.
Goodness.
Yeah.
That's a lot of soda too.
Yeah, you see some weirdness. Yeah. Archaeologists are a bit weird sometimes.
We're odd. We're odd. We're okay with that. Some are more odd than others.
Yes, definitely. I was also amused that we do also get the most mild dirty field talk ever.
Yes.
Yeah, they have this whole joke around talking about Raleigh would like just dick around or something and not do anything, just walk around the site. And Elliot was kind of like, had apparently never heard a lady engage in this kind of talk.
Right.
And so Faye is going to go check out another area, and she kind of jokes, "I'm going to go dick around," and he's aghast.
I know.
But I'm sure he was quite impressed as well, actually.
I know, like when you're out in the field, sometimes the women are just more rough and tumble than some of the guys.
I've heard some wild stuff that will not be repeated in this podcast.
Right. And a lot of times it comes from the women.
Yeah. So she's off looking for sites, walking some of the trails, which are kind of public trails around there.
Yeah, I guess it just seems like, these are trails that over the years the community has kind of used to get to and from people's houses. And like there's like a bridge that has been kind of rigged over this
ravine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like erosion ravines and stuff, which is something that they definitely have in that area.
Yeah.
There's a nice little acknowledgement that the signs of an archaeological site can be subtle. In this case, they're talking about poplars specifically because there's some of the first trees reclaim a cleared area in the region. Not something I've encountered or had to worry about, but yeah, it makes sense.
Here I've noticed in Florida and like in the Southeast, it's sweet gums. When an area has been cleared, the sweet gums they have a party.
Yeah.
They all pop up everywhere. Also, one thing that we look for, which can be a bit tricky because sometimes they're invasive plants that birds spread everywhere, but a lot of times, like if you're out in the woods and you find lilies or other plants that are like crepe myrtles that have been used for landscape in the past, it's a good indication that there might be an old homestead or something there.
And you do develop an eye for certain things, like there's a line, a little bit of a ditch here that's just too straight. You get an eye for that sort of a thing. It doesn't always mean that is actually a site. So
yeah, you just kind of, especially if you've been working in the same area for a while, which I know Faye's not been working in this specific area, but...
And she's not been working that long either.
Right. But you do develop an eye. You're like, that just looks different and weird. And sometimes you can't even explain it, but you're like, nope, there's something going on. You get like little spidey sense. You pick up on some patterns
and stuff, even if you don't realize it.
Yeah.
She notes there are some signs that there was some level of prosperity in the 1930s with the houses and their locations and everything. In the book, she wonders if they were with the WPA and earned some money. I wondered if there wasn't maybe some bootlegging or something too going on, because 30s would have also been a bit of prohibition.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I mean, and it could be both.
Could be both.
You know?
But yeah, she's looking for older buildings that aren't in use anymore, turned into sheds or barns. Sometimes old houses will be that. And then she comes across Rania Smiley, mysteriously on the trail with her son Zach. And Rania is, as per usual, very prickly.
Yeah, I thought it was funny because I guess it looked like, because Rania was jumping into one of the ravines and she was like, oh no, Rania!
Yeah.
Like thought she had like tried to jump off the cliff or something. But it turns out she and her son are just out collecting clay.
She knows the route.
Yep.
She knows the steps down that ravine.
Yep.
It wasn't any big deal to her.
Right. There was a little ledge where she could kind of jump down, but she disappeared from view. But Faye kind of follows her down there and they get to talking. And at first, like you said, kind of prickly, but they kind of warm up to each other. It's an interesting interaction, I thought.
They both tell the other one they thought the other one didn't like them.
Right. Which, how often has that happened?
Right.
I feel like I've been in situations like that before. You just both kind of misread each other. I get that. But Rania, she's doing her thing and there's some cute interactions between Faye and Rania's son, which I enjoyed. Rania has this like yoke that she's made to carry the buckets of clay out of the ravine. And it kind of sparks an idea in Faye as she sees her just kind of lift up this yoke, 2 buckets full of clay, like it's no big deal. And she's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
This woman looks like she might be a good worker and maybe she can dig.
Yeah, and she says she'll more than replace the 2 men that are missing. And
Yep.
100%.
And so she offers her a job.
Yep. And it seems like a friendship is started.
Yeah.
Through this whole interaction.
But I enjoyed the whole interaction was really interesting, like with the kid and them both figuring out they both thought they didn't like each other.
But like you said, it does make some of her behavior more confusing too. Right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is a shift, and that was before when she thought Faye didn't like her.
Well, and I'm also thinking like through their friendship, maybe we'll learn what she was yelling at Jimmy about and
why she intervened with the excavation around Miss Dovey's property.
So I feel like
we assume she did anyway.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be our end to getting some of the backstory and some of the questions regarding her actions answered.
Yeah,
so.
And I like the development for Rania too, actually.
I know,
that's a lot of fun.
No, Mariana Evans does a great job with character development. She doesn't rush things.
No.
She kind of lets you marinate with them.
And lets the characters bounce off each other and then find their way. And it was really good. The next chapter, they make their way back and Faye keeps her bearings about where things are located. And Rania says, not bad for a city girl.
Right.
Which Faye was amused because she had abandoned Tallahassee, which was not exactly a tremendous metropolis, which I was amused at because it's not exactly a tremendous metropolis.
But remember in the book, Panacea was a metropolis, which
That's right.
cracked me up in the first book.
in the first book. You were right. You're right. It is as far from metropolis.
Tallahassee is definitely more of a metropolis metropolis than Panacea.
Yeah, very much so.
Yes.
That's funny. Forgot about that. Faye's going to go check out the mound now, and Rania warns her that Dwayne will shoot her if he catches her, but he also never leaves his chair, basically.
Right, yeah.
So I was a little confused. It seemed like she's just warning her, but she's also like, but yeah, you'll be fine, kind of, without actually saying that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they disparage him a little bit.
I feel like it's kind of a jab at Dwayne, maybe.
They both do.
Yeah.
Yeah, take jabs at him. And she comes across Leo and George with a barrel fire.
Yeah, just burning their trash, I guess.
Yeah, and warming themselves up over the burning plastic or whatever. And then they literally threaten her life.
Yeah.
And she decides it's best to not be doing this alone, which it occurred to me multiple times throughout this section. You think a member of your team may have been murdered for the things they were investigating. The fire marshal has explicitly told you, do not be alone. What are you doing, Faye? So that's like when I said, sometimes she's really smart, sometimes she's a little dumb.
Faye is Fayeing hard.
This is very much her, isn't it? We get some great Joe character building here.
Yes. I enjoyed this, and it's like, again, with the character building, it's just very clever. But apparently Joe has a hard time reading, and it's kind of a source of embarrassment for him. And I thought, like, who is it? Laurel, right? So he's interacting with Laurel, and she offers to tutor him. But like the whole interaction's very sweet, I think.
It is. And it helped that, like, she knew something immediately that would help him out. Like, he was having trouble. He needed something under the text, essentially, to help him like keep it straight.
And I was wondering, like, if maybe I don't know enough about it, but I was wondering if like that's a sign of like a learning disability. Like, is that dyslexia? I don't know. I was just kind of wondering if that's what was trying to develop here, but I don't know.
It seems like Laurel may be suspecting that because she does do a few tests with Joe just to kind of check and see. I can see why people like her and not everybody liked Carmen.
Yeah.
Right? Because she is exceptionally good at understanding where people are coming from.
Right. She meets them where they're at.
Yeah, and knowing what they need.
Yeah, and because Joe was like, tests, I don't like tests. And she's like, well, they're more like games.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, she saw the look on his face and everything and can read him. She seems very good.
Yeah. Could this be Joe's romantic interest?
Could be Joe's romance.
Oh my gosh.
He literally swept her off her feet when
true.
She came. So Faye goes with Joe to meet Dwayne. Smart to go with Joe this time.
Yes,
ask permission
should
for
have
the
done
mound.
in the first place.
And she realizes that he is a lot of things, but he's not stupid. And so he realizes what she's after, and he's like, absolutely not, because he's also a jerk. I mean, it's his property, his right, but he's just doing it because he's a jerk.
I was gonna say, he's
not doing it for any real reason.
He's not worried about having people on his property.
Well, as far as we know.
Right, yeah. But I think, he's just kind of making her life difficult, I feel like.
Faye overhears Bingham and Emery complaining about Raleigh, and she basically tells him, well, I've got problems too. As a senior person here, you should go tell him or I will.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure why they thought that was a threat, other than they were confident it wouldn't go well if Faye brought these issues to Raleigh.
Yeah.
Right? It was a little unclear to me, but hopefully they do it. Next, we're in the grocery store. Faye's looking for some shampoo and finds a plain but very nicely shaped mug.
I do like just the description of the grocery store, because I feel like I've been in, when I go camping or something, or I'm doing field work and you go into like the little grocery store looking for a toothbrush or something. It's like nothing's organized in the way you think it should be.
Right. Yeah, it's not in the toiletries. It's in the vaguely soapy area.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I can visualize this store. I've been there.
So the mug is made by Rania, and it's the similar gray stuff that they've been finding a lot. And it turns out that Rania actually will, when people break something they've had in the family for a long time, she will actually do a replica of it, essentially, which explains a lot. And it also basically means that the gray ceramics are not necessarily that diagnostic.
Right, yeah.
If she's doing thermoluminescence anyway, you could make an argument for that, but it's not your best lead.
I'm interested about, I don't know enough about thermoluminescence, but I thought you had to kind of know from the beginning that you were going to do that because you had to keep light to a minimum or something. But maybe it's come further than that. I know when it first started, people would try and keep the ceramics in the shade, but
I don't know enough about it either, but I do know that like C14 dating has come a long way.
Yeah.
Like where it used to be you couldn't touch it, you had to keep potato chips away from it.
Right.
Now it does none of that matter. matters.
Right.
Just get it in the bag and they'll deal with the rest.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating that it's come that far.
But, and I do like the fact that like Rania is very, very knowledgeable of the soils and the clay in the area. And I wonder if that'll come into play as she's working on the excavation.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, actually, she's working on that stuff. She would maybe recognize some of it.
And I do like in this book how Mariana Evans does a really good job of showing how the locals are valuable in the knowledge that they have. Like she's not portraying them as like these uneducated, just kind of dumb folk, right? Like Rania has a very specific set of skills. And because of what she does, she understands the soils better than any archaeologist coming in from the outside ever can hope to.
Which does contrast a little bit with what the sense I was getting from Carmen.
Right.
Right? Like almost like Carmen had that attitude a little bit.
Yeah. So
we get some more like maybe mystery building because Amanda Lynn, who's Jimmy's mother, is there, and she's an interesting person.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure her out.
Me
she's
too.
A little quirky.
So she's talking up Jimmy and everything, and Jimmy works in a library and very busy, and the relationship, they have Miss Dovey's permission to get married, Jimmy and Irene, thank you.
And I thought it was interesting how everybody, I guess Miss Dovey's kind of the unofficial local genealogist and kind of gives the okay, like, yep, you guys can get married. You're not too closely related.
Apparently she's had to intervene a few times.
Yeah.
Also, we know that Charles Lavelle, Amanda Lynn's husband, is dead, but she talks to him and about him as though she talks to him all the time. Is he there?
Yeah.
But also straight up she acknowledges that he's dead.
Yeah. She's like, oh, Charles would love this.
So it's a little unclear like how deeply she believes it, or she is just comforting her to talk to him as if he was there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Faye realizes Amanda Lynn is I'm unclear on this. Somehow she can get permission to dig on the mound site from Amanda Lynn when she couldn't from Dwayne Montrose.
I guess they're related.
Right.
But I'm guessing I was a little unclear about this as well. I assume there must be some like deed to the land with the mound on it where Amanda Lynn is on it too. It's never explicitly said.
Yeah, but Amanda, and
Amanda Lynn has some, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they're related, but they seem to be related.
Well, Amanda Lynn lost her parents young and essentially grew up with Dwayne.
Right.
They're distant cousins.
Right.
Not distant enough that Miss Dovey suggested that they get married at one point, but to both of them, they feel too closely related.
Yeah, they feel like brother and sister.
Right.
She's like, it would be too weird. And so he married Kiki, and we kind of learn a little bit about Kiki in this too, or at least some rumors about Kiki and how she contracted hepatitis C, but they're unconfirmed. And as Faye mentioned, like kind of points to, like there's other ways to get hepatitis C.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that she was cheating on her husband or anything like that.
That is the assumption from a lot of people, though.
Yeah. Sounds like typical small town.
Yeah, and it occurred to me too that we've been told it's hepatitis C, but it's possible it's not.
Right. That's what I was wondering too.
Because HIV does seem to be the through disease for this book so far. I also noted that Faye's looking at the gray ceramics and realizes that they're passing the designs down from generation to generation, which brings us back to Small Things Forgotten. In that case, they were dealing with headstone designs. And so local people would be the ones that crafted the local headstones, and those designs would be passed down from generation to generation and morph slowly, influenced on the population centers, what was popular slowly over time.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, because I just came across some of my notes and it says Dwayne Montrose's mound wasn't the only early settlement site, not if Carmen's notes from the interview with Margie and Elliot were correct. But I think it might be a different homestead. So that might explain the permission issue.
Okay.
But
yeah, so maybe he owns the property with the mound, but she owns something next to it.
This is the Lester homestead. So this is the Lester homestead, I think. But yeah, she gets permission.
Yep. And then we get a interview with Amanda Lynn. And I think the important thing here is there is some very intense feuding over how land was divvied up at one point.
Yeah.
But currently nobody really knows anything about that.
Yeah.
Oh, also important, Carmen mentions that she was looking at an old will but didn't have it on hand at the time of this interview.
Right.
But the old will might have something to do with how that land was divvied up.
And I feel when I was reading this, I felt like a land dispute, and maybe she recovered just through her research, discovered like somebody didn't own the land they thought they owned or had been living on or something. I feel like that might be grounds for murder.
It could be motivation.
Yeah. Not grounds. I guess I shouldn't say grounds. You should be murdered.
You're allowed to then, yes.
But yeah, I think we might be kind of getting some background into what's going on and why Carmen may have been murdered. She discovered something that somebody didn't like.
Last chapter. Wednesday morning, Faye goes to deal with Raleigh again and tries to get approval for thermoluminescence. He says he'll take care of it. It seems suspiciously helpful.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. I don't trust him.
She also tells him what she's going to do for the digging. She's going to finish up his work there and then move on to another site. So she is kind of following Magda's advice here.
Yeah.
He gives her permission for the plan, but he only gives her 3 days.
Which is most definitely not enough time. I don't know why he's being such a jerk about this. I mean, because he's a jerk. He's being a jerk because he's a jerk.
Because he's a jerk. There's been thoughts that maybe he's trying to undermine something too. But he's also weird. I'm going to read a bit. He says, "You may not uncover anything. I wonder if you are aware of how I build my career. I work in museums, carefully studying artifacts and cataloging them in every detail. I build a case for their provenience through meticulous library research. It's not exciting, glamorous work like your brand of archaeology, but it's a damn less wasteful. Not to mention it avoids the danger of destroying irreplaceable information that exists every time you turn over a trowel full of soil. It is my position that excavations should be reserved for cases in which the project goals can be served in no other way. Our other scientists are making progress. I've seen no sign that you will be able to match them."
That whole section like annoyed the crap out of me.
It's very weird.
Well, and I'm like, first of all, your museum objects should have provenience. You shouldn't have to do research to find their provenience, because if they were found within the proper archaeological context, you shouldn't need to do all that.
Well, and no documentary research is going to give them provenience.
Right. Yeah. And like,
Interestingly, like, I agree with a fair amount of what he's saying. He's a jerk, so he's still a jerk, but there's some weirdness in here too. Like the idea that we should be studying things that have already been excavated. That is a thing that needs to happen more in the discipline. Lots of stuff have been excavated and never thoroughly studied because it's just, too much or no one is interested at the time.
Right.
That is a thing that we need to be doing more regularly. The excavation should only happen when it needs to happen.
Right. And I think right here we're kind of getting a sense of why he is just so bad at field work too, because he doesn't seem to understand how archaeologists figure out where to dig, and he just seems to think of it as a waste. And well, yeah, when you're digging in the completely wrong spot.
But and with the entirely wrong methods, like he's worried about information being lost forever. It's like, well, then you do the job right.
Yeah,
sure, there's still the risk, but it's a risk instead of a certainty, like with what he was doing.
Right, yeah. He was better off, like we said, just leaving things where they were, because he was destroying the provenience because he wasn't properly documenting where he was finding things and what he was finding things, and then he wasn't even properly storing them.
Given this attitude, it makes me wonder if he knew that spot wasn't actually going to do anything, and he was there because he thought it wasn't going to destroy something important.
I was wondering is he like actively trying to undermine the science of archaeology for some reason? Like, does he have some weird vendetta or something? It's just so strange. Why are you on this project?
The whole idea that fieldwork is under attack too over lab work is really strange and not how the world actually works too. It's usually the other way around. Usually, if anything gets derided, it's going to be the indoor work.
Yeah.
Because it's not real archaeology.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I could see him, maybe he's just a little sensitive about that, but it's a weird attitude to take.
Yeah.
So that whole thing.
Like, where did he go to school?
Right. Did he go to school?
Who gave him this degree?
So Faye is out on the property with Amanda Lynn, observing that she's having to deal with topography for the first time.
And kudzu.
What? And
Lots of kudzu.
Yep.
Freaking hate that stuff.
Yep, it is everywhere. Again, there's some really good details on actual archaeology here. So she's found a surveyor's benchmark by the road that she's going to use to reference that's what we would actually do.
Yep.
And she's planning to dig some shovel test probes, which I acknowledge is a very academic phrasing for that, but it is definitely something I've heard in academic settings. And so far, that's most of her experience is academic settings, so that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
We would just say shovel tests most of the time.
I did note that, I guess during the shovel testing, they were finding a lot of pull tabs, and it brought me back to our project when we were finding a lot of pull tabs.
Yep.
Goodness. PTSD from pull tabs.
She does also find a Madison point, which if you're watching the video version of this, I'll put a photo in there so you can see what that is. Not what she's looking for, and is out of context in the erosion ravine, but it's something to show for her work at least.
Right.
She's like,
at least I have something to show and tell during the status update.
Before everything is potentially canceled. She's back with Rania, and Rania is just killing it like we knew she would be. So Rania is behind the store, backfilling, and makes a good suggestion of keeping the dirt piles covered overnight because it might rain, and that makes it easier to backfill. Why didn't we ever think of that? I don't think we ever did that. And that would have been a good thing to do.
Yeah, no,
There's definitely sometimes where I backfilled wet dirt.
Yeah, it's a workout.
Yep. Fire Marshal shows up, and she gives him Carmen's notes, and they have a conversation about lab results, which I'm not quite clear on. Essentially, most things are as expected except for Carmen's pillow, which has everything expected, just some things are more than you'd expect.
Right, yeah.
Faye suggests testing the other 2 pillows, because sometimes like dry cleaning and stuff can get some of these chemicals in there, and if they're all similar, then that's, probably nothing then. But he appreciates her input there for sure, I think.
One thing, and also that he hasn't found the briefcase yet too, so that's
correct.
But he mentions that some of the chemicals, although they're also used in dry cleaning, they're used in medicines and stuff, and he mentions anesthesia specifically. And so I was like, ooh, I wonder if somebody drugged Carmen or something, and that's why she didn't wake up.
Yeah, and maybe it wasn't even intentional in that case.
Right.
It could have, but they did something wrong, and then they had to try and cover it up. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's very complimentary, and he's taking all this very seriously, and they're both of a similar mind that enough is adding up here that they're concerned for everyone's safety.
And I love this whole conversation just because it shows how kind of universal the scientific process is.
Well, especially this, because we've talked about how crime scene analysis is not that different from archaeology in a lot of ways. So they're actually overlapping quite a bit here.
Yeah.
And that's probably the whole premise for the book too, I assume, the series. And then Faye immediately goes off and doesn't follow his advice and is on site all by herself.
Yep.
Amanda Lynn does show up, but I don't think she was out there the whole time. And yeah, they just have a chat, and then Faye says she'd like to meet Jimmy, and Amanda Lynn says that's good luck because I was going to invite you over for dinner. And that is where our chapter ends. All right, so that wraps up chapter 15 and this episode. I'm real curious, Barbara, what do you think of Rania? Do you think she is on Faye's side, or is she actually opposing Faye and playing it smart here?
I kind of wonder, because the way she acted when Faye went to Miss Dovey's house, I'm wondering if she's maybe protecting Miss Dovey from something.
Okay.
Or maybe there's something on Miss Dovey's property or something that she's kind of protecting. I don't know. Or maybe she's the one that doesn't own the land that she's sitting on that was in the will. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it has something to do with Miss Dovey.
Yeah. And do you think it is ultimately sinister, or is it the more minor mysteries of involving the project and stuff?
I think it's not necessarily sinister. I think it's just there's something either Miss Dovey knows or that could be harmful to someone else and could put Miss Dovey in their crosshairs.
And I'm not sure what to think myself, but we'll have to find out next time.
All right. Happy reading, everybody.